few days back I was observing some sparrows, just digging for food in the ground, and um, it, I didn't plan for it, but just um, in one moment it seemed like um, I, I guess I was being present, but uh, it, there was a flash of insight that um, that when you're present, the question of intelligence drops, and you there is a being, and a being is observing another being. It was powerful, and the frustrating thing is, in that moment, within a second, this flash of insight was there, and it somehow struck very true. And then I wanted to analyze it, I guess, and it's gone. Now I'm trying to recreate it, I guess, and it's not quite. At least I'm left with the insight, so that is good. Um, so I guess my question was, my question is, this intuition or insight, what can it point to, and is there any way to develop it, or just keep practicing?
Well, strictly speaking, there's no way to develop it because it's your nature, it's already there. So when we talk about practice or development or cultivation, we really mean learning to stop interfering. So that insight is a very good angle on the truth and reality of presence. And, I've had a lot of experiences like that from a young age with other animals that clarifies that. And when you said the question of intelligence doesn't matter, you mean, I think you mean that the thinking apparatus that makes the self doesn't matter. When that falls away, there's no comparison. So even saying there's one being watching another being, that's a reconstruction. That's a little less cluttered than our usual thinking, but it's still a little too cluttered.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So there's not even two beings.
Yeah, I think the insight was that it doesn't matter whether that being is intelligent or not. That question becomes meaningless.
Right. Even that being becomes meaningless. You, as a being watching another being, becomes meaningless. There's just the action. There's just the happening. And we can, I think it's one of the ways we can more easily see that insight is with other creatures that we instinctively know don't have a complicated thinking apparatus. They're just being. And when we really see that, we in that moment know that we are just being too. And we're relieved of the usual thinking apparatus of the self that we have.
So I forgot to ask earlier, I became a little selfish and wanted to extrapolate that experience to addressing other interpersonal conflicts. If I were to disagree with someone, or meet with someone who has a completely different way of thinking, I think if we are present at that, if we look at it moment by moment basis, there is no difference. But I don't know how practical it is, or I guess that's why my question on how to develop or refine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as soon as we start leaning into that develop and refine thing, the self takes charge.
Yeah.
You know, the self wants to recreate experiences. You can't recreate that experience. The beauty of that experience, the beauty of all deeply clear, liberating experiences is that's our nature. It's the ground of our being. It's already that way. That's why it's so beautiful. So then for the self to think, oh, I'm going to recreate that. I'm going to make it better. I'm going to make it more common. I'm going to make it... That's the problem. You don't have to recreate it. You don't have to cultivate it. It's always there. You just have to stop interfering. That's the beauty of it. And one way to approach that is when you notice interfering arise, don't make a big deal about it. Yeah. Then you notice you're frustrated that interfering arises, you know? And it just gets layer on layer on layer. It's okay. It's another action of the sparrow. It's another movement of the sparrow. With humans, we have the thinking apparatus arise. But if you don't make a big thing of it, it dissipates again. That dropping away is always available. And the beauty of pure happening that the sparrow is enjoying all the time, we can assume, is accessible to us all the time. But the self that wants to recreate it and improve ourselves and arrive in time at a more developed state, that's what's getting in the way. So it takes a great confidence realizing that you really don't have to add to this experience, to this present reality. You don't have to add to it. Our practice is really a taking away. It's a dropping away practice. So this is already fulfilled, already complete. Just the phenomena of the self through time, the story of the self through time, and all our efforts and standards and intentions and wanting to be a certain place and a certain level and a certain understanding. Only that's obscuring the appreciation of what's always happening. So when that mind comes up, oh, I got to hold on to this, or I got to make it again, that we can learn to respond by like, oh, that habit again. Just let go. Just let go. There's no recreating anything again. It's always new and always fresh and always an opportunity to taste fullness. As you say, the insight is there and it touches us, and that doesn't go away. And also noticing the thinking come in the next second is also instructive. And then you see, oh yeah, that's what happens. Just seeing that whole phenomena, that whole progression, that whole mechanism unfold is how we learn. It's so tempting, it's so compelling to try to manipulate your experience somehow to make it more intense. The ego story is so used to having a goal and working to achieve it. It's very hard to let go of that. But you just have to remember that real fulfillment, real contentment, real belonging has to be just the experience of being alive, nothing added to it. You had it as a smallest child before you had any sophistication in your thinking and manipulation. And like we intuit, the sparrow has it. All beings have it exactly equally. That's why there's no difference between intelligence or anything else. Presence is equal. Awareness is equal. Because the comparison and the differences are only thoughts, and in awareness itself there's no thoughts. Thoughts arise within awareness, but awareness itself is free of thought. The most dramatic experience I had like that, I remember, is somehow it's even more compelling, or it was for me, with a large animal that's similar to our size. When I think I was 16, I was in the North Cascades and came across a bear on the trail, just really close in front of me, really close. It was dusk, and bears I must have been upwind, no, downwind, so it couldn't smell me. And bears are short-sighted, so trying to see what this figure was. And slowly was walking forward on the trail, and I just stood there on the trail and we just looked into each other's eyes. And there was no difference, there was no sense of me, this person, and this bear. It was just mutual recognition, mutual apprehension. And it's dramatic because it's something we normally put in the other category. Even other people we put in the other category. That's the problem with our interpersonal relationships. But to an extent, we don't put other people as far into a different category. Animals we put farther. So when we really, except maybe pets, but when we really look into the eyes of another animal that's not your pet, and the other becomes the same, it's very liberating. It's very dramatic. So that question of intelligence, that question of rating, how sophisticated we are, how right we are, how skillful we are, how virtuous we are, all that we carry around with us all the time. And it's such a weight. We're comparing ourselves mostly to other people, but can also be to other creatures and to nature itself and the universe or whatever. And it's the cause of our loneliness, it's the cause of our separation, our not belonging, all our struggles. But the self story doesn't want to let go of that, unless sometimes it does if it has a really negative impression of itself. But most of the time, we've worked so hard through our life to get our understanding and to get our intelligence and to get our strategies for living what we think is the most virtuous life and all that stuff. So we don't want to let go of it. We carry it around with us, but it's just separate. And then in one moment we see just the sparrows playing and we realize that's freedom. That's the sparrow's freedom and it's my freedom, and it's the same freedom. And it doesn't have anything to do with all the stuff I've accumulated about me. It doesn't have to do with that. It's just life unfolding, and the sparrow is just letting life unfold. And we are too, but we don't think so we don't enjoy it. We think we're involved in this complicated struggle. And in our mental landscape we are, right? We're not really, because we're not really choosing anything. We're just like the sparrow anyway. So practice is just realizing that and enjoying it instead of thinking that we're controlling everything. And that our difference from other people and other beings and everything is important. It's important in the sense that it makes us suffer. And it's not important to bring us happiness. It's the opposite. It's our limitation. We're lugging a library around with us everywhere. And we think that's going to protect us and bring us happiness. That's our navigation equipment to have a successful life, but it's not. Our heart knows that. successful life is our simple nature. So that's not to say if you're caught in a thinking mode, you want to break out of it, there are things you can do that are helpful. Sitting practice and moving practices, sound practices, and just remembering insights also can be helpful. Even listening to inspiring people or reading inspiring words. But they're just helpful in reminding you to relax and let go. They don't create that state, that openness to freedom. They remind us that the way we're trying to get to freedom is mistaken, it's the opposite direction. The more we think we can control and manipulate and arrive at success in the future, the more we're looking off, the more we're losing that freedom. So practice are just to relax the grip of thought, to relax, to feel more comfortable so we can let go of the tendency to hold tight to our strategies. Just remember there's nothing we need to do. Just have to let go. Trying to find success in time, in the future, or in the past. The main practice of Sufis is called zikr. Sometimes dhikr. I guess it depends on the kind of Arabic, and it means it's their all-night group practice together, and it means remembering. Just remembering that truth is your nature. And as they would say it, there's nothing but God. So those little flashes of insight, those little moments of presence are really important in establishing our confidence and knowing our direction. And don't worry how short they last. That's our heart opening up. And the habit mind that swoops in immediately, trying to hold it, or trying to improve it, or trying to get it again. You just got to notice that for what it is. The self swooping in, the self-habit. Just have to relax it, because the self-habit didn't make that experience. That's the crucial insight we have to see. When we have an insight experience like that, and then the thinking comes in, how am I going to make that better or extend it or whatever? We have to realize, no, that thinking mind didn't make it. It was there already. I didn't do anything to make that. There was a gap. That's what happened. There was a gap in that thinking. And if you have in your consciousness memories from early childhood that are also clear, you can realize I didn't have any sophistication in my thinking then, and it was there. Some people have more clear memories like that from childhood than other people. I have quite some strong ones, but the Buddha's story has that. At least one version of the Buddha story, of Buddha's awakening, is that he was at the end of his ropes with all his practices, and they weren't working. And he remembered that when he was a child of 5, that he had had this beautiful experience, also with watching other creatures. Watching birds, actually. Watching birds eat the worms, though. So there was some initial sadness. You see death happening in the process of nature, but then he saw the whole of it and became totally at peace with it. And he remembered that as a 5-year-old child I had that experience. And it was clearer than these things I have when I'm deep in my sophisticated adult spiritual practices. You know? And that was his inspiration, to just sit there and give up. It's always here. It's always shining. It's always carrying us. It's only whether we let ourselves enjoy it and whether we're still involved in some process to force something, to achieve something, to attain something, figure something out, to grasp it. But we can't. We can grasp mundane things, but they won't bring us liberation and contentment. What brings us liberation and contentment, you can't grasp. You can't have it. It's what you are. You have to give up what's in the way. I didn't really address the second part so much that you said, but it is the same with people. It's just harder to see with people. The bird, you know, that doesn't have complicated thinking, so you just see it being and you're inspired to just let yourself just be. With other people, they give you their thinking, so that usually instigates you to start thinking yourself. But you can experience that with other people. Just see them as the being they are.
But that's the thing, right? If you see them a moment at a time, it's easier to relate, because at that moment, everything else, at that moment, nothing else can be perceived, whether
Right.
they are of this faith or whether
Right,
of this
right, right.
practice, or
Right.
none of that matters.
Right.
But when we engage with them, all the baggage of
Right.
that returns.
Right.
So, again, it's a question of what do I bring from that insight into everyday activity that could help.
You can't really bring anything. You got to go empty-handed. So what insight happens just happens. We have to trust that it just happens. That's why so many teachers don't like people recording their talks. Traditionally, it's good for other people. Like I remember my teacher in Japan, for many years he didn't let anyone record anything. And then he was convinced to do it because there's a lot of people who couldn't come to the temple. For them, he recorded it. But for the people there, people would try to take notes and stuff. He says, stop it, you can't. If you hear it, you hear it. It's there. You know, if you don't, then next time. You know, you try to hold it. That's yourself trying to fix things, instead of just realizing the truth of the words and seeing it. So we're always just seeing the person in the moment. That's always the way it is. They're always just in the moment. So when we bring in that baggage, our thinking baggage about them, that's when we can't see them anymore. Like if you start saying, that's a sparrow, it's stupid, and I'm a human that's smart, you can't see it anymore. What's happening when you really gaze into the eyes of another person or another creature without thinking? It can be a powerful experience, because as Douglas Harding would say, it's not face to face. That's our abstract thinking. We imagine our face and then we see their face. We see face to face, but it's not. It's face to no face. There's only one face in our gazing. But then at the same time, we know that from that perspective, there's only this face. So the two people looking at each other, it falls away and we realize it's just experiencing. That's when we realize I'm the same.
The other day, like I was having kind of not an argument, but a conversation with someone. We're both looking completely opposite directions, and at one point I'm like, okay, this clearly we're not connecting because you're looking this way, I'm looking this way, and let's just try to at least look at each other. And seem to help things a little bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
sometimes it's too, like, it's intense, and it's the one person's really believing a story, and it's not the openness to be there together. It's not gonna work. But
It's easier to
better
look
than-
away.
Better than just be completely.
Yeah. And to look away, you just dive into your story. You just dive into your book, right? Instead of appreciating the being there. When you're looking at someone's eyes, it feels uncomfortable often because we're not comfortable not having a story, and our story stops to drive. Because you look in someone's eyes and you become very focused on the looking, your own looking and their looking, and you realize it's the same looking. There's just looking happening. That becomes more prominent than some story. You can't even remember what your argument was about. A little bit you can throw off your self-idea a little bit just looking in the mirror, actually. If you look at your own eyes, I had a strong experience with that when I was looking at my own eyes. And you realize that's just the image, but there's just looking. There isn't really that person. The person we think we are is just this image, just this flashing image in a mirror, but who we really are is the looking. In that case, it's face to no face, but it's the face that's supposed to be you to no face. That's the real you. So just like we make other people and other beings others when they're not really, we also make ourself an other. We walk around with ourself as an other. That's our self-idea. It's an other. But there's no such thing. There's just who we really are, which is happening, which is looking, which is just awareness happening. Nothing has to be added to it. Nothing really has to be taken away either. But in the moment of seeing that, everything drops away. In other words, you can make a project, I got to take all this stuff away. That's just something in the way. You don't have to do anything. And we're so addicted to struggle. It's really hard to realize we don't have to struggle.